US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says NATO allies are expected to buy more American weapons and supply them to Ukraine after a key arms agreement. Hegseth spoke ahead of a meeting in Brussels earlier today where NATO defense ministers were weighing their response to Russian aggression.
Firepower. That's what is coming. We expect it is coming from NATO. You get peace when you are strong, not when you use strong words or wag your finger. You get it when you have strong and real capabilities that adversaries respect. And I believe that's what NATO is doing. I believe that's what the Pearl Initiative is. So our expectation today is that more countries donate even more, that they purchase even more to provide for Ukraine to bring that conflict to a peaceful conclusion.
Well, Hegseth did not mention supplying American-made Tomahawk missiles to Kyiv. President Trump says he expects Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to push for those Tomahawks when the two leaders meet at the White House on Friday. So let's get the view from Europe. CNN senior international correspondent Fred Pleitgen is joining us from Berlin with the latest. So with President Zelensky heading to the White House, as I say, Fred, on Friday, all eyes on the big question of whether Donald Trump will in fact provide those Tomahawks.
Yeah, what progress such talks are going to make. It was quite interesting, of course, to hear President Trump speak about this yesterday when he said he knows that Volodymyr Zelensky is going to come to Washington, D.C., not only asking for, obviously, more air defense capabilities for the Ukrainians to try and fend off some of those Russian attacks on Ukraine's infrastructure, which, of course, have increased drastically over the last couple of months, but that he also believes that Volodymyr Zelensky is going to be asking for those Tomahawk missiles. And President Trump keeps saying, look, maybe he would be willing to give the Ukrainians those Tomahawk missiles if President Putin of Russia is not willing, or President Trump does not see a willingness to end the war in Ukraine, but he sort of left that open. But of course, that is a question that looms over that NATO summit that is going on in Brussels. Specifically, the NATO member states did not speak about this. And it was quite interesting to hear earlier today, the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, he came out and he said, look, obviously NATO is in favor of that meeting and very happy about that meeting between President Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. But any questions about supplying Tomahawk missiles to the Ukrainians is a bilateral issue between the United States and between Ukraine, both if the U.S. directly supplied those weapons to the Ukrainians, but also if under that Pearl Initiative that we just heard Pete Hegseth, the U.S. Secretary of War, speak about, the U.S. were to sell those weapons to European NATO member states to then give them to Ukraine. The U.S. obviously would have to sign off on those being transferred and how those would be used by the Ukrainians as well. So it's a question that looms over that summit, but certainly not one that anybody who's at that summit is willing to speak about directly. Pete Hegseth, of course, speaking at length about that Pearl Initiative and about the fact that many NATO member states have committed to spending more on defense. One of the points that he made, obviously always good for a one-liner, he said it's time for NATO member states to turn goals into guns, as he put it, Christina.
Very catchy. Fred, we know that NATO members are looking for ways to plug holes in their vulnerable air defences, given the amount of drone incursions that we've seen. Were there any commitments or decisions made on that today?
Absolutely massive topic at that summit, absolutely massive topic here in continental Europe, certainly in Eastern Europe as well. I think one of the things that recent drone sightings that we've seen in Denmark, for instance, but over German airports as well, and then, of course, that incursion that happened in Poland, but also those Russian jets that allegedly flew over Estonian territory, even though, of course, the Russians still deny that. That has certainly laid bare some of the issues that NATO has in its air defense capabilities. There's two things, really, that the alliance is looking at right now. Also, the Secretary General of NATO spoke about this. On the one hand, obviously, to improve those capabilities, they did say that they felt that NATO reacted adequately, especially to that drone incursion in Poland, was obviously able to shoot down those drones that made it into Polish territory. But they also acknowledge that the way they did that is pretty ineffective, of course, using fighter jets in many cases, in some cases the F-35, specifically Dutch F-35, at very high cost to shoot down those drones that, of course, are very cheap. So one of the things that NATO member states are going to be looking at is doing that in a more cost-effective way, which means, on the one hand, detecting drones and other things a lot quicker that fly into NATO territory, but then also finding ways to take drones down more cost-effectively with systems that could be on the ground, but of course also drone systems, for instance, to take down drones as well. It's a big topic. It's something that NATO says they are going to invest heavily in. The big key word that you hear again and again at that summit is the drone wall, trying to build up a wall, if you will, in the sky, figuratively speaking, obviously, to make sure that Russian drones do not make it into NATO territory. A lot of NATO member states, I think, right now are realizing that the drone threat is very real to their territory and is certainly something that they need to deal with, whether or not they're on NATO's eastern flanks in the territory close to Russia and Belarus, but also much deeper inside Western Europe, as well as those sightings, for instance, in Denmark and Germany have shown, Christina.
Yeah. I know you'll continue to follow this, Fred, as we look ahead to that meeting between Zelensky and Trump this Friday. Thank you for now.